For 7 years, the boy clawed at his ear until it bled. Every specialist in soul, every top surgeon from Tokyo to Berlin said the same thing. It is nerve damage, it is congenital, it is karma. His father, the most feared man in South Korea, burned down rival territories, kidnapped medical directors, and spent billions of won begging the universe for a different answer. They all just bowed and apologized. Then a debt-ridden maid noticed something no one else dared to look for. And what she pulled out of that little boy's ear didn't just break the silence, it exposed a betrayal so dark it would bring the entire criminal underworld to its knees. Kang Dae-hyun was a predator. A man who wore three-piece Italian suits while ordering executions. He controlled the docks, the casinos, and the politicians. But his son, Ji-hoon, was born into a silent prison. 7 years old, never heard a whisper, never heard a warning. Dae-hyun had tried everything. Shamans, neurosurgeons, experimental treatments. They all said the emptiness in the boy's ears was permanent, a punishment from the gods for the blood on his father's hands. But Dae-hyun refused to accept it, because Ji-hoon was the only piece of his soul he hadn't sold yet. His wife was murdered in a car bombing meant for him just weeks after the boy was born. So Dae-hyun kept searching, kept killing the messengers of bad news, kept begging a god he didn't believe in. What he didn't know was that the answer wasn't coming from a high-tech hospital in Gangnam. It was coming from the terrified woman he just hired to scrub his marble floors. Elena was a foreigner, a nobody, drowning in her father's gambling debts. She had no medical degree, just a sharp eye and a desperate need to survive. But she noticed something about Ji-hoon that every terrified specialist had missed, something deep inside his ear, something calcified. And one rainy night, while the guards were patrolling the perimeter, she made a decision that would either save the heir of the Seven Stars Syndicate or get her executed in the basement. What happened next? You need to see this for yourself. Before we dive into this roller coaster of emotion, betrayal, and redemption, welcome back to Ken Romance Stories. If you love tales where the underdog wins and the coldest hearts are melted, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss what we have coming up. We are currently building a massive Christmas special series for this holiday season, stories that are going to warm your winter nights, so make sure you are locked in. Now, like this video to help us reach more romance lovers, and tell me in the comments, do you believe in intuition over expertise? Let's find out if Elena's intuition saved her life or ended it. The Kang estate did not look like a home. It looked like a fortress. Perched on a hill overlooking the Han River, it was surrounded by 12-foot walls topped with electrified wire. Cameras swiveled like mechanical eyes at every corner. Inside, the luxury was cold. Black marble floors, sharp angles, modern art that looked like bruised shadows. It was quiet. Deadly quiet. The staff moved like ghosts. They knew the rules. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look the boss in the eye, and above all, do not approach the young master. Ji-hoon, the heir to this dark empire, was a ghost in his own home. He was small for his age, with hair as black as ink and skin pale enough to show the blue veins beneath. He didn't play with toys. He didn't run. He spent his days sitting in the corner of the vast, empty living room, rocking back and forth. His world was absolute silence. But it wasn't a peaceful silence, it was a tormented one. Kang Dae-hyun, the Dragon of Soul, sat in his office, swirling a glass of expensive whiskey. He watched his son on the security monitors. The man who could snap a rival's neck without his pulse rising felt his heart shatter Every time he looked at that screen, he remembered the day Ji-hoon was born. The doctors had taken him away for tests immediately. They came back with grim faces. "The auditory nerves are dead," they had said. "He will never hear your voice." Dae-hyun had raged. He had destroyed the hospital room. He had flown in specialists from Johns Hopkins from Switzerland. He paid them millions just to walk through the door. They ran MRIs, CT scans, nerve conduction studies. They all came back with the same conclusion. "There is nothing there, Mr. Kang. It is a birth defect." A birth defect, or a curse. That's what his rivals whispered, that the ghosts of the men Dae-hyun had killed had stolen his son's hearing. The guilt was a physical weight on Dae-hyun's shoulders. He believed it. He believed his sins had deafened his son. So he stopped looking for a cure and started looking for vengeance against the world. He became colder, crueler. He forbade music in the house. If his son couldn't hear the beauty of the world, no one would. But he didn't realize that the silence wasn't empty. It was full of secrets. And the person who would unlock them was walking up the long driveway, shivering in a thin coat, terrified out of her mind. Elena gripped the strap of her bag until her knuckles turned white. She looked up at the towering gates of the Kang fortress. This was suicide. Everyone knew who Kang Dae-hyun was. Everyone knew that people who went into that house sometimes didn't come out, but she had no choice. 2 days ago, the Black Sharks, a street gang her father owed money to, had paid her a visit. They gave her a deadline, 1 month, 50 million won, or they would take her kidney, or worse. Her father was a gambling addict who had fled the country, leaving Elena to pay for his sins. She had applied to every agency in Seoul, but a maid's salary couldn't cover that kind of debt. Then the offer came, a private placement, high risk, high reward. A discreet household needed a live-in maid. The salary was astronomical, enough to clear the debt in 3 months. But the contract had a clause, complete non-disclosure, breach of contract results in immediate termination. And in the underworld, termination didn't mean firing. The head housekeeper, Ms. Park, met her at the service entrance. Ms. Park was a woman made of steel and wire. She wore a traditional hanbok, but her eyes were modern and sharp. She looked Elena up and down with disdain. "You are the new girl," Ms. Park said. It wasn't a question. "You are foreigner? You speak Korean?" "Yes, ma'am." Elena bowed low. "Fluent. Good. Listen to me once. You clean. You cook. You keep your head down. You see nothing. You hear nothing. You say nothing. If Mr. Kang is in the room, you become furniture. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "And one more thing." Ms. Park stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "The boy, Ji-hoon, do not bother him. Do not try to play with him. Do not touch him. The last girl who tried to pity him, well, she is no longer in Seoul. Do you understand?" Elena swallowed hard, a lump of fear in her throat. "I understand." Ms. Park nodded and led her into the belly of the beast. The first few days were a blur of terror and exhaustion. The house was enormous, and Elena scrubbed until her hands were raw. She saw Kang Dae-hyun only once, from a distance. He was walking through the hallway, flanked by 4 bodyguards. The air seemed to drop 10 degrees when he passed. He didn't look like a gangster. He looked like a CEO, handsome and sharp, but his eyes were dead. They were the eyes of a man who had seen hell and decided to build a condo there. But it was the boy, Ji-hoon, who drew Elena's attention. Despite Ms. Park's warnings, Elena couldn't help but watch him. He was heartbreakingly beautiful, like a porcelain doll that had been left on a shelf. He spent hours sitting by the glass doors looking out at the rain. He never made a sound, not a cry, not a laugh, not a footstep. He moved with the eerie grace of a cat. But Elena noticed something else, a tic, a habit. Every few minutes, Ji-hoon's hand would fly to his right ear. He would press the palm of his hand against it, hard, and squeeze his eyes shut. Sometimes he would press the side of his head against the cold glass of the window, or the marble of a pillar, and just hold it there, his face twisted in a grimace. It didn't look like the behavior of a deaf child. It looked like the behavior of a child in pain. Elena had a younger brother back home who had suffered from chronic ear infections. She knew the signs, the rubbing, the pressure-seeking, the irritability, but this was the son of a billionaire warlord. Surely if he had an infection the doctors would know. Surely the best specialists in the world hadn't missed something so basic. "Stop staring!" a voice hissed. Elena jumped. It was one of the younger maids, Ji-hoon. She was folding laundry nearby. "He does that," Ji-hoon whispered, glancing around to make sure Ms. Park wasn't watching. "He's crazy. The deafness made him crazy. He bangs his head sometimes. Just ignore it." "Has a doctor looked at it recently?" Elena whispered back. "Of course," Ji-hoon scoffed. "Dr. Choi comes every week. He gives the boy shots to calm him down, says it's phantom pain from the dead nerves. Now shut up before Ms. Park hears us." Phantom pain. Elena went back to polishing the silver, but the phrase stuck in her head. Why would dead nerves cause pain that required cold compresses? Why would a child wince when he swallowed? A week passed. Elena settled into the routine of fear, but her heart was breaking for the boy. One afternoon, while the rest of the staff was preparing for a banquet Dae-hyun was hosting for his lieutenants, Elena found herself alone in the library. Ji-hoon was there, sitting under a massive mahogany desk. He was rocking, clutching his ear, tears streaming silently down his face. Elena froze. The rules screamed in her head, "Walk away, become furniture," but the tears, they were so heavy, so silent. Elena looked at the camera in the corner of the room. It was rotating away. She had maybe 10 seconds. She crouched down. She didn't touch him. She just waved her hand gently in his peripheral vision. Ji-hoon jumped, his eyes wide with terror. He scrambled back, hitting his head on the desk. "It's okay," Elena mouthed, holding her hands up. She pulled a small wrapped candy from her pocket, a strawberry chew. She slid it across the floor. Ji-hoon stared at it. Then he looked at her. His eyes were dark pools of mistrust. "For you," she mouthed. He hesitated, then snatched the candy. He didn't eat it. He just held it. But for a second, he stopped clutching his ear. That was the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, a secret language developed between the Maid and the Mafia prince. When the guards weren't looking, Elena would slide him treats. She would make funny faces when Ms. Park's back was turned. She learned that he wasn't crazy. He was lonely, and he was hurting. One rainy Tuesday, the pain seemed to be worse. Ji-hoon refused to eat. He lay on the rug in the playroom, curled in a fetal position, sobbing without sound. Dr. Choi had visited earlier that morning. Elena had seen the doctor, a slick man with a gold watch and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had given Ji-hoon an injection and told Dae-hyun, "It is just a tantrum, boss. His condition makes him frustrated." Dae-hyun had looked ready to murder someone, but he nodded. He trusted Dr. Choi. Choi had been the family doctor for 20 years. But Elena knew a tantrum didn't make a child sweat with fever. She was cleaning the windows in the playroom. The guards were outside, smoking under the eaves to stay out of the rain. Ms. Park was in the kitchen. Elena put down her cloth. She knelt beside Ji-hoon. "Ji-hoon!" She tapped his shoulder gently. He looked up. His face was flushed red. He pointed to his ear and then hit the floor with his fist. Elena made a decision. a dangerous, stupid decision. She pulled a small pen light from her apron pocket. She used it to check for dust in dark corners. "Let me look," she signaled. She tapped her own ear, then pointed to his. "Look." Ji-hoon flinched away. He was terrified of doctors. He was terrified of instruments. "No hurt," Elena mouthed. She stroked his hair, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. If Dae-hyun walked in now, if a guard saw this on the monitors, she was dead. "I promise, no hurt." Something in her eyes, maybe the sheer desperation of her kindness, made the boy pause. He slowly lowered his hand. Eleanor took a deep breath. She gently pulled his earlobe back and up, just like her mother used to do for her brother. She clicked the penlight on. She leaned in. The ear canal was inflamed, red and angry. But deep inside, past the swelling, she saw something. It wasn't an eardrum. It was a wall, a dark, jagged, brownish-black mass. It looked like rock. It was wedged deep, completely blocking the canal. It looked ancient, like it had been there for years, growing, hardening, collecting debris. Elena gasped and pulled back. This wasn't nerve damage. This wasn't a dead ear. This was a blockage, a massive impacted obstruction. Her mind raced. How? How could the specialists at Johns Hopkins miss this? How could the famous specialists in Switzerland miss this? Unless they didn't. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept through Elena's body. Dr. Choi, the man with the gold watch, the man who came every week to give calming injections. If the boy was cured, Dr. Choi was just a family doctor. But as long as the boy was sick and complicated, Dr. Choi was indispensable. He was billing the Mafia boss millions for treatments that didn't exist. He was keeping the heir of the Seven Stars Syndicate deaf on purpose. It was a conspiracy, and she, a maid with 50 million won in debt, had just stumbled into the middle of it. Ji-hoon whimpered, grabbing his ear again. Elena turned off the light. She stared at the boy. If she told Dae-hyun, would he believe her? Or would Dr. Choi spin it, say she hurt the boy, and have her thrown into the Han River? But looking at Ji-hoon's tear-streaked face, Elena knew she couldn't leave it. The pressure from that mass was causing him agony. It could cause permanent damage if it hadn't already. She needed to get it out, but not now. She needed tools. She needed a plan. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her father. She thought of the black sharks. She thought of the little boy curling up in silence. "God," she whispered. "Why me? I'm just a cleaner." But the answer came in the silence. "Because you looked." The next evening, the opportunity came. But it came wrapped in a nightmare. Kang Dae-hyun was supposed to be away on business in Busan. The house was running on skeletal staff, but around 8 p.m. the alarm system glitched. A thunderstorm had knocked out the perimeter sensors for a brief reset. The guards were distracted, running diagnostics. Ji-hoon was in his bedroom. Elena heard the thump from the hallway. She abandoned her cart and ran. She found Ji-hoon on the floor. He was thrashing. He was clawing at his ear so hard that blood was running down his neck. The pressure must have spiked with the storm. He was screaming, a raw, guttural sound of pure torture. Elena didn't think. She locked the bedroom door. She ran to the bathroom attached to his room. She grabbed the first aid kit, tweezers, hydrogen peroxide, olive oil. She rushed back to him. "Ji-hoon! Ji-hoon! Look at me!" He couldn't hear her. He was lost in the pain. Elena pinned him down with her body weight. He fought her, thinking she was another doctor coming to hurt him. I'm sorry," she sobbed, pouring the olive oil into his ear to lubricate the canal. "I have to do this." She grabbed the tweezers. They were sharp, steel. She turned on her penlight, holding it in her mouth. She tilted his head. The mass was right there, swollen and angry. "Please, God, steady my hand." She inserted the tweezers. Ji-hoon screamed, his body arching off the floor. Elena clamped down on the edge of the mass. It was hard as stone. She pulled. It didn't move. It was fused to the skin. "Come on," she gritted her teeth. She twisted gently, trying to break the seal. Blood welled up. Ji-hoon was kicking her, scratching her arms. "Almost there, baby, almost there." She felt a shift, a suction sound. She pulled harder, and then the door exploded inward. Elena screamed, but she didn't let go of the tweezers. Kang Dae-hyun stood in the doorway, his suit soaking wet from the rain, a silver handgun leveled directly at Elena's forehead. He had come home early. He had heard his son screaming. He had found the door locked. "Drop it!" Dae-hyun roared, his voice like thunder. "Get away from him, or I will paint this room with your brains!" Behind him, 2 massive bodyguards rushed in, weapons drawn. Time stopped. Elena looked at the gun barrel. It was black, infinite. She looked at Dae-hyun's eyes. They were filled with the madness of a father who thinks his child is being murdered. "I said move!" Dae-hyun cocked the hammer. Click. "No!" Elena screamed back. She didn't let go. She couldn't. She was halfway out. If she stopped now, the mass would slip back and rupture the eardrum. "I'm helping him!" "You're making him bleed!" Dae-hyun lunged forward. Elena squeezed her eyes shut and pulled with everything she had. Schluck! A sickening wet sound echoed in the room. Elena flew back, landing hard on her elbows. Ji-hoon gasped, a sound so loud it seemed to shake the walls. Dae-hyun froze, the gun inches from Elena's face. In Elena's shaking hand, clamped in the tweezers, was a mass the size of a large marble. It was black, covered in wax and old blood. It was hideous. "What?" Dae-hyun's voice trembled. "What is that?" But before Elena could answer, Ji-hoon sat up. His eyes were wide. He looked at the window where the rain was hammering against the glass. He looked at the floor where his own ragged breathing was audible. He reached up and touched his ear. There was no mass, just air. Then he looked at his father. "Appa!" The word was broken. It was rusty, unused, guttural. But it was Korean. Appa, Dad. The gun slipped from Dae-hyun's fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. The silence of 7 years shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Dae-hyun dropped to his knees. He ignored the guards. He ignored the blood on the floor. He stared at his son. "Ji-hoon?" he whispered. Ji-hoon flinched. He covered his ears. "Loud!" he croaked. "Loud!" He could hear the whisper. Dae-hyun let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a sob that had been building for a decade. He crawled forward and wrapped his arms around his son, burying his face in the boy's small chest. "You can hear me," Dae-hyun sobbed, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "My God, you can hear me." Eleanor sat on the floor, trembling violently. The adrenaline was crashing. She looked at the mass in the tweezers. It was a compacted buildup of wax, skin cells, and a small, foreign object at the center. It looked like a bead, maybe something he had stuck in his ear as a baby, and the body had calcified around it. The doctors had seen this. They had to have seen this. Dae-hyun looked up. His eyes were red, wild. He looked at Elena, then he looked at the mass in her hand. "What is that?" he asked, his voice shaking with rage and wonder. "A blockage," Eleanor whispered. It was deep. It's been there for years." "Years." Dae-hyun stood up slowly. The predator was back, but this time he wasn't looking at the maid. "Dr. Choi." "He comes every week," Eleanor said, her voice gaining strength. "He gives him injections. He said it was dead nerves." Dae-hyun's face went cold. A terrible, icy calm settled over him. He turned to his head of security. "Bring me Dr. Choi," Dae-hyun said softly. "Bring him to the basement, and bring his wife and his partners." "Yes, boss." The guards vanished. Dae-hyun turned back to Elena. She flinched, expecting him to be angry that she had touched his son, that she had defied the rules. Instead, the Dragon of Soul, the man who owned the city, did something impossible. He bowed. He lowered his head until it was level with her waist, a sign of ultimate respect. "I almost killed you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I pointed a gun at the woman who saved my son." Eleanor stammered. "I just looked. No one else looked." "They looked," Dae-hyun corrected her, looking at his son, who was now marveling at the sound of his own clapping hands. "They looked, and they saw a gold mine. They saw a father desperate enough to pay anything." He walked over to Elena and extended a hand. She took it. He pulled her up. "You have debt," Dae-hyun said. It wasn't a question. "No one takes this job unless they have debt." 50 million won, Elena whispered. "To the Black Sharks." Dae-hyun nodded. He pulled out his phone and typed a message. "The Black Sharks no longer exist," he said simply. "And your debt is paid, triple." Elena's knees buckled. "But that is not enough," Dae-hyun continued. He looked at Ji-hoon, who was now laughing, a bubbling, musical sound that filled the room. "You gave me back my life. You gave him the world." Dae-hyun took Elena's bloodied hand in both of his. "You are no longer a maid in this house. You are family, and no one touches my family." Epilogue. 2 hours later, Dr. Choi was brought in. When he saw Ji-hoon sitting on the couch, listening to Mozart on headphones, with tears of joy in his eyes, the doctor fainted from sheer terror. He knew what was coming, but Elena didn't watch the vengeance. She sat on the balcony, watching the rain stop. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. She looked through the glass doors. Inside, the most dangerous man in Korea was sitting on the floor, reading a book out loud to his son. "Once upon a time," Dae-hyun read, his voice trembling with happiness. And for the first time, Ji-hoon didn't just see the lips moving. He heard the story. The silence was over. And in the heart of the Mafia fortress, love finally had a sound. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside the Kang mansion was just beginning. The doctor was gone. The guards had dragged him out the back exit, and everyone knew he would never be seen in Seoul again. But in the master bedroom, the atmosphere had shifted from violence to something far more dangerous, intimacy. Eleanor stood by the window, her hands still shaking. She looked down at her reflection in the glass. A black woman in a maid's uniform, thousands of miles from home, with blood on her apron. She touched her face. She had come here to be invisible, to be a shadow. But tonight, she was the brightest thing in the room. Kang Dae-hyun stood up from the floor where he had been holding his son. He smoothed his suit jacket. The predator was back, but the eyes were different. He turned to look at her. And for the first time, he didn't just see a uniform, he saw her. He saw the way the moonlight caught the deep, rich undertones of her skin. He saw the texture of her hair, pulled back in practical braids that were starting to fray at the edges from the struggle. He saw the strength in her shoulders. In a country obsessed with pale perfection, she was a shock of beautiful, unapologetic darkness. "You are shaking," Dae-hyun said. His voice was low, vibrating through the room. Elena clasped her hands. I have never defied a man like you, sir. Where I come from, we respect authority, but..." Dae-hyun took a step closer. "But we protect the children first," she whispered. Dae-hyun stopped inches from her. The height difference was imposing. He was a tower of Korean steel. She was a statue of ebony grace. He reached out. Elena flinched, expecting a strike. But he didn't strike. He gently took her hand, the one that had held the tweezers. His pale fingers wrapped around her dark hand. The visual contrast was striking. Yin and yang, night and day. "You didn't defy me, Elena," he said, testing the sound of her name on his tongue. "You defied my blindness." Just then, Ji-hoon tugged on Elena's apron. She looked down. The little boy was pointing at his stomach. "Hungry," he croaked. It was the first time he had ever asked for food. Usually, the staff had to force him to eat. Dae-hyun looked at his son, then at the maid. "He's hungry." "I can make him juk," Elena said quickly, referring to the traditional Korean rice porridge. "Or I can make him what my grandmother made me." Dae-hyun paused. "And what is that?" "Jollof?" She smiled nervously. "But mild, not spicy." Dae-hyun stared at her for a long beat. "Make it. Make enough for 3. The kitchen staff nearly fainted when they saw the boss walk in, following the black maid. Usually, the kitchen was forbidden territory for the master. But Dae-hyun sat on a stool at the island, loosening his tie, watching Elena work. He watched how she moved. There was a rhythm to her cooking that was different from the Korean chefs. She hummed a song, something soulful, something from her homeland. The melody floated through the sterile, stainless steel kitchen, warming it up. "Where are you from?" Dae-hyun asked suddenly. Elena paused while chopping onions. "I was born in Detroit, but my parents, they are Nigerian. We moved around a lot." "Detroit," Dae-hyun nodded. "Rough city." "Not as rough as this house, sir," she shot back before she could stop herself. The chefs gasped. "You did not talk back to the dragon." But Dae-hyun laughed, a real dry chuckle. "Touché." When the food was ready, they didn't go to the formal dining room with the 50-foot table. They ate in the kitchen. Ji-hoon devoured the red rice, his eyes wide with the explosion of flavor. Dae-hyun took a bite. It was foreign, rich, heavily seasoned. It tasted like life. "It is good," Dae-hyun said, looking at her. "It tastes warm." "We cook with love, sir," Elena said, wiping a grain of rice from Ji-hoon's chin. "If you cook with fear, the food tastes like ash." Dae-hyun put his spoon down. He looked at her intensely. "And that is all this house has been, isn't it? Ash." "Because you made it that way," Elena said softly. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was electric. "Ms. Park told me about your debt," Dae-hyun said, his voice businesslike again. 50 million won. "Yes. I wired 100 million to your account 10 minutes ago." Elena dropped her spoon. "Sir, that is—" "And," he cut her off, "I am doubling your salary, but you will no longer clean the floors." "I don't understand." "You are Ji-hoon's governess now. You are his guardian. Where he goes, you go. You are the only one who hears him. So you will be his ears until he learns to use his own." Elena looked at Ji-hoon. The boy was smiling at her, his teeth stained red with tomato sauce. She felt a swelling in her chest. She had come here for money, but she was staying for him. "I accept," she whispered. "Good." Dae-hyun stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow I have to introduce the new heir to the syndicate, and you will be standing right beside him." "Me? But, sir, look at me. I stick out. I am—" "You are the woman who saved the Kang bloodline," Dae-hyun said, his eyes darkening with a possessive heat. "Let them stare. If anyone looks at you with disrespect, I will remove their eyes." The next few weeks were a transformation, not just for Ji-hoon, but for the entire estate. With Elena in charge of the boy, colour started to return to the mansion. She opened the curtains. She played music, jazz, Afrobeats, classical. Ji-hoon was like a sponge. He soaked up every sound. He learned English and Korean simultaneously, and he shadowed Elena like a duckling. But the real shift was in the master. The staff noticed it first. Kang Dae-hyun was coming home earlier. He was spending less time at the casino and more time in the garden, watching Elena teach Ji-hoon how to play catch. One evening, Elena was in the library reading a book. She was wearing a new dress. Dae-hyun had ordered a wardrobe for her. It was a deep emerald green silk that hugged her curves and made her skin glow. She didn't hear him enter. "You look different," Dae-hyun's voice came from the shadows. Elena jumped. "Sir, I was just reading, I know." He walked into the light. He looked tired. The business of running a crime empire was exhausting. "Read to me." "Sir?" "My eyes are tired. Read to me. Your voice. It is different from the women here. It is deeper, soothing." So, the black maid sat in the leather armchair, and the Korean Mafia boss lay on the sofa, eyes closed, listening to her read poetry. It became their ritual, a secret intimacy that was more dangerous than sex. But peace in the Mafia world never lasts. The incident happened at the Grand Gala. It was the annual gathering of the 7 stars. The most powerful crime lords in Asia were in attendance. Dae-hyun had insisted Elena attend to watch over Ji-hoon. She wore a gown of gold sequins that Dae-hyun had personally selected. When she walked into the ballroom holding Ji-hoon's hand, the room went silent. The stares were heavy, confused, judgmental. "Who is the dark one?" she heard a woman whisper in Korean. "Is she the nanny or the mistress?" "Disgraceful," an older man muttered, bringing a foreigner into the inner circle. Elena kept her head high, but inside she was crumbling. She felt like an exhibit. A rival boss, Mr. Han, approached them. He was drunk, and he was cruel. "Kang!" Han shouted, slapping Dae-hyun on the back. "I see you have bought a new pet, very exotic. Is this the new trend, importing help from the jungle?" The room went deathly silent. Elena froze. The insult slapped her across the face. She looked down, expecting Dae-hyun to laugh it off to keep the peace. Dae-hyun slowly took a sip of his champagne. He set the glass down on a passing waiter's tray. He turned to Mr. Han. His face was a mask of perfect calm. "Apologize," Dae-hyun said softly. Han blinked. "What? It is a joke, Dae-hyun. Don't be sensitive." "Apologize to the lady," Dae-hyun repeated, stepping closer. "And then bow." Han scoffed. "Bow? To the help? Are you insane?" Dae-hyun moved so fast, no one saw the strike. 1 second Han was standing. The next, he was on his knees, Dae-hyun's hand wrapped around his throat, squeezing the life out of him. "She is not the help," Dae-hyun whispered, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. "She is the mother of this house, and you are breathing her air because I allow it." Han gagged, his face turning purple. "Say you are sorry!" Dae-hyun tightened his grip. "Sorry," Han choked out. "I am sorry." Dae-hyun released him. Han collapsed, gasping. Dae-hyun straightened his cuffs. He turned to the room. His eyes swept over the hundreds of guests. "Let this be clear," he announced, his voice ice-cold. "Elena is under my protection. An insult to her is a declaration of war against me. Does anyone else have a joke they want to tell?" Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Dae-hyun turned to Elena. He didn't look at the crowd. He offered her his arm. "Shall we get some fresh air?" he asked gently. Elena took his arm. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would bruise her ribs. As they walked out to the balcony, leaving the stunned crowd behind, she looked at him. "You started a war," she whispered. "For me." "I would burn this city for you," Dae-hyun said, looking out at the skyline. "Do you not know that yet?" He turned to her. The moonlight was back, dancing on her skin. "Elena," he said, "I have spent my life in the dark. I thought darkness was my ally, but then you walked in, with your dark skin and your bright heart. You showed me that darkness can be warm, it can be beautiful." He reached out and cupped her face. His thumb stroked her cheek. "They say a king needs a queen of his own blood," Dae-hyun murmured, leaning in. "But I don't want a queen of my blood, I want the queen who saved it." Elena's breath hitched. "Sir." "I am just the maid." "No." Dae-hyun brushed his lips against hers, a soft, electric promise. "You are the miracle." And under the soul moonlight, the Mafia boss kissed the black maid. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, hungry claim, a kiss that sealed their fate and promised that no matter who came for them, police, rivals, or the devil himself, they would face it together. Scene end outro. Wow, I have literal chills. Did you see how he handled Mr. Han? That is what I call a power move. It turns out the blockage in the ear wasn't the only thing that needed to be removed. Dae-hyun needed to remove the blockage around his heart too. And Elena was the only surgeon for the job. Guys, this story is far from over. Rumor has it that Mr. Han isn't going to take that humiliation lightly. What happens when the rival gangs target Elena to get to Dae-hyun? We will be exploring that in part 3 next week. But before you go, I have a question for you. If you were Elena, would you stay in that dangerous house for love, or would you take your millions and run back to America? Let me know in the comments below. Stay for the boss, or run with the cash? I'm reading every single comment. Don't forget, we are dropping our Christmas special in just a few days, The Billionaire Santa's Secret Baby, so make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. You do not want to miss the holiday tea. This is Ken Romance Stories. And remember, sometimes the hero doesn't wear a cape. Sometimes she wears an apron and brings the flavor. See you in the next one.